Hi guys, it's Suri, so welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to be doing my mid-monthly March wrap-up. The reason I'm doing this is because it's only at the halfway point of March and I've already read like 8 books this month. And as you guys know, when I do my wrap-ups, I like to talk a lot about the books that I read. I like to go into a lot of detail on my reviews, and because I think nobody would watch a like 1 hour long March wrap-up if I keep going at this reading pace, I thought, why not split it up a little bit at least and talk about the books that I've read so far in March in this video. Now, if you're already subscribed to my channel and you often watch my wrap-ups, you will know that I like to do stats at the end of every month, and obviously I'll still be doing that this month, and I'll be showing you these books as well in that video. Basically, I'm just doing these reviews ahead of time just so I don't have to spend as much time talking about them in my full March wrap-up. We'll be doing stats and all those things. So that's kind of the gist of it. And before we get started, please don't forget to like this video if you're enjoying it and subscribe to my channel. And now let's jump right into the reviews for these 8 books, which is kind of crazy. In my normal wrap-ups, I like to go in order from like worst to best, but this time around I thought, why not mix it up, and I'm gonna go in chronological order of when I read them. And the first book I finished in March was The Raven King by Maggie Stiefvater. This is the 4th and final book in the Raven cycle. If you want to know my thoughts on this entire series, you can go check out, I think, the video I did a week ago where I talk about this entire series as a whole, and I give you kind of my overall thoughts on the entire series without giving any spoilers, so I will link that in the cards if you missed it. I ended up rating this last book 3 out of 5 stars because while it was a good-ish conclusion, it left some things to be desired in my opinion. I really like that this book focused more on the perspective of Gansey and his search for Glendower that finally came to fruition, and I really like that my ship that I'd been shipping for 3.5 books now finally reached the harbor. But nonetheless, I think both of these things actually, like the relationship as well as the story climax of the series, were really anticlimactic. When they do find Glendower, it's literally handled within a few pages. It's super like a non-event, and I was like, oh wait, that's it? Like, this is what we've been waiting for 4 books? Really? Are you kidding me? It was rushed, it was unsatisfactory, and I was like really disappointed at that. I also think that there were some plot points that were just not finished at all. They were literally just not mentioned again, even though they hadn't been given a proper conclusion yet, and that was very frustrating. And similar to the Dream Thieves, where we have the new character of the Gray Man that gets a lot of screen time in this book, that part, I guess, is taken up by Henry, who is given a lot of screen time and kind of jumps into the plot out of nowhere. I honestly have no idea why he is even in this book. I think he's super superfluous. He does do some meaningful things, but they're only kind of served to be convenient to the plot, and they're not really inherently necessary, and I just think he should have been left out of this book entirely and the series entirely, to be perfectly honest. He had kind of this like Deus Ex Machina vibe to him, and it was just really frustrating. Like, why is this really necessary? His inclusion in the friend group just felt really forced and, again, unnecessary. So yeah, overall it was an okay conclusion. I gave her 3 stars. But it didn't blow me away quite as much as I had hoped it would. The next book I read, however, was the complete opposite of disappointing, and I can honestly say I'm so happy I read this. It was my very first 5-star read of the year. This is the first book, and so far the only book, I've given 5 stars to, and obviously that means something. I've been trying to be a little bit more stingy with my 5 stars. I've always been kind of stingy, but even more so this year, because I was like, is it really good enough to be like, yes, this is fantastic, giving it 5 stars. So this one was, in my opinion, and that is I'm Thinking of Ending Things by Ian Reid. Now, I know this is somewhat an unpopular opinion because so many people, like anytime I would show this book in a video, would comment like, oh, I liked the book throughout, but I hated the ending. And I feel like that's sort of the consensus among most readers. For me, however, this book was pure perfection. I have not a single thing to criticize about it, not even kidding. It's a very short psychological thriller, so I don't want to give too much away, but basically it sets off following a couple that driving in a car to the guy's parents' house somewhere in the middle of nowhere, and they're just having a conversation, and it's told from the girl's perspective, and she's kind of thinking about like, oh well, we've only been together for 1 month, and things are going kind of okay, but like not really that well. So I'm thinking of like ending the relationship. Should I do it? Is this a good time? Obviously it's not, because they're actually going to visit his parents. But you know, sort of things like that. And so they go to his house and things are a little weird there. And then they get weirder and weirder and weirder as the book continues. And it is honestly one of the most creepy and terrifying books I've read in a very long time. It is very, very good at doing this like subtle horror thing, just subtly inserting these feelings of absolute terror in you as the book continues, and the main character is put into more and more weird situations that don't make sense, and you're just like frantically trying to put the pieces together, but you can't come up with like a reasonable conclusion until the very end. I will say, while I didn't predict the ending, I don't think that's quite possible. I definitely reached that conclusion not as like a oh my god plot twist moment in the end, but kind of like gradually. So I was already kind of putting the clues together by that point. I was like, okay, this is, I think, like the only thing that really makes sense. So even before that moment where everything like flipped, like the plot twist moment, I guess, I was like already kind of there mentally. So I know for a lot of people that point in the book did not make sense, and I've read many, many reviews where people are like, I have no idea what happened here. And I get it, but I think because I was already kind of on my way to that conclusion myself, it just kind of seamlessly fit into the picture. I was like, oh yeah, this is the thing I was waiting for. This is like the, oh my god, the comeuppance. I don't know what that means. I have no idea why I used that word when I don't know what it means. Basically, that was just like the best moment of the book for me, and I was just, oh my god, I cannot even tell you. This book is so atmospheric, so creepy, so well written, and it really, really plays with your mind. It definitely isn't a book that like presents all the answers to you on a silver platter. You do have to kind of either do your research after it. Like there's a website, I can link it down below, where people put like theories and like discuss aspects of the book that like didn't make sense to them or that they just figured out. I think that's so helpful because you're like, oh yeah, that makes so much more sense now. And I will link it below. It's obviously full of spoilers, so don't go there if you haven't read it yet. But if you have and you're just not quite sure of what you actually read, read it. That being said, I would definitely recommend checking this out. It's very, very short. It's a super quick read. Try to read it in like one sitting, which is pretty much what I did, because that will really keep this like atmospheric tension going, and you'll be like hooked and like sucked into the story consistently. And I think it works best to read it in like one sitting. So this is basically just one of the best books ever for me. I love this kind of stuff. I love psychological thrillers that really fuck with your head, and this definitely fulfilled that criterion. So yeah, I absolutely adored this. I totally get where some people don't, but to me this was amazing and I definitely recommend it. Then continuing with my March Mystery Madness TBR, I actually think I've already read like all of it so far in this month. That's pretty cool. This next book is Neverworld Awake by Marisha Pessl. It is a YA thriller mystery, and I gave it 4 stars. I really enjoyed it. This follows a girl, I think she's in her freshman year of college, and after graduation her boyfriend died, or like in their senior year her boyfriend died, and since then she hasn't been in touch with their mutual friend group at all, and her boyfriend's death has never really been cleared up. And this one night when she's at her parents' house, she decides to go to her friend's house to celebrate her birthday with her old friends and like kind of confront them about it, or like at least finally ask them questions to figure out exactly what happened. And that night they all collectively on the way home from a party get into a car accident and essentially die, except that they're basically transported into this limbo world where the same like few hours, I think it's like 12 or 10 hours or something like that, consistently repeat themselves. And the only way to get out of it is to vote which one person among them gets to survive and everybody else dies. And it has to be a unanimous vote. So in the real world, they're stuck in like 1 second of time where all of them are like in the middle between life and death, and in this limbo world they have to vote who gets to survive. So it's not the most unique of premises, considering this like Groundhog Day type of repeating thing is very pervasive, especially recently in literature. I personally am a huge fan of it, and if you want me to do a video on like books I recommend that do this well, let me know. But I still think this is executed so well because you can kind of really follow these teenagers along their path of like psychological deterioration. That's honestly the best way I can put it. As they're stuck in this limbo, they at first obviously don't believe this is happening, and then they try to get out of it, and then they literally like lose their will to live, or like go off the rails completely, start taking drugs and alcohol like all day, every day, instead of trying to figure out how to get out of it. And eventually they decide that they need to find out what happened to this girl's boyfriend, how he died. And so piece by piece, that this old mystery is sort of rolled up again and discussed anew, and everybody is sort of given their point of view. And yeah, it kind of goes from there. I don't want to say more than that. I think it's super well written. I think it's very tension-packed, and there's a lot of moments where you question like, who is telling the truth right here, who is lying, where is this going. It's definitely not a clear-cut mystery where like, okay, this person did it, we know it. Like, it's very, very complex, and I really, really enjoyed that. The ending to me was a little bit like, okay, so that was it. It didn't pack quite the punch that I was expecting, but I still really enjoyed this overall. It definitely also messes with your head quite a bit, and I think this is definitely one of the best YA mysteries that I've read. I don't actually know if I've read that many to be able to say that, but I still think this is very well done, and if you haven't read it yet, do. Then I have my first of 2 DNFs so far this month, which is sad, but also it was just necessary, unfortunately. This is The Hate You Give by Angie Thomas. I've talked about this book in a recent Weekend Reads video where I mentioned that I had already DNF'd it. I got about 100 and something, I think, pages into it, but had to put it down because it just was not working. I had quite a few issues with this book, ranging from the fact that to me it was poorly written and the characters were not very well fleshed out. They seemed all very stereotypical, both the black characters and the white characters. And since I posted my review on Goodreads particularly, I've been having a lot of discussions with people about like stereotypes, if they're always harmful, if they're never harmful, like what really is the deal with stereotypes. And I think for me personally, I've come to the conclusion that stereotypes are not that black and white of a thing to look at. Basically, it really just depends how you utilize them. If you use stereotypes to talk about a large group of people in like a generalizing way, like these people tend to be this way, tend to do this, I don't think it's that big of a deal because they're coming from somewhere. Like, these are not made up things. They're usually based at least partially in truth. And if you just look at it like, okay, this is just a tendency that exists among a certain group of people, I don't think it's that big of a deal. However, if you like use stereotypes to presume things about individuals that you can't possibly know for a fact, or you use it in like a harmful way to basically put them down based on negative stereotypes, I think that's when they kind of become a problem. In books, I think stereotypes can be quite a good thing, especially if you're trying to subvert them somehow. Basically show them, oh, this is just stereotypical, and then kind of take a detour and be like, no, it's not quite as clear-cut as that. Or if you just use them as a basis kind of to start from building your characters. But for me in this book, there was nothing more to these characters than stereotypes. It felt so flat. It felt to me like I really wasn't getting anything new out of this book because it was so like clear-cut, like black people are this and white people are this. There's just no nuance to that. There's no gray areas. There's no development. There's no subversion of these stereotypes. And so overall, I felt like this was just not a good piece of writing in many ways. Star was also just a very hypocritical person and just an exhausting point of view to read from, because she would actively go out her way to like look for ways in which she is allegedly oppressed by others, by white people specifically, when that really wasn't even the case. Like, for example, she has a group of white friends, and one of the girls is like somewhat the leader of the group, as you would have with like any friendship group, right? Like, they tend to make most decisions because they just have an assertive personality, and it doesn't mean that they're like forcing others to do something. It's just kind of like, oh, this is our leader, we look to them to like make most decisions. And Star kind of uses that moment to be like, oh, of course she's the leader because I'm just a black girl and she's a white girl. And I think that this is a good example of how Star tries to make things about race that aren't necessarily about race. And especially in this case, when she's never actually shown to have like made any attempts to make decisions or to be a particularly assertive person. Like, I get that that would be a different situation if like she had tried to suggest something and she was shut down by the other girl. But that wasn't even the case. It's literally, she had no opinion in that moment and the other girl made a decision and she was like, oh, racist. Like, what? So overall, I think while this book definitely had good intentions in trying to talk about a topic that is very controversial and very important in today's society. That topic is obviously police brutality, which is obviously a horrendous thing and needs to be stopped. But at the same time, I feel like this book failed in its execution and didn't really do what it was hopefully trying to do. And I just am not a fan. I don't think this is a particularly good piece of work. And a cynical side of me does believe that so many people give this high ratings because they're afraid of being called a racist. And I think that that's probably not that far from the truth. It's totally fine if you enjoyed this for whatever reason. I'm not trying to take that away from you. I'm just saying this like overwhelming praise that this book received doesn't really fit the actual work that it is, in my opinion. Immediately after that, I unfortunately had to DNF another book, and that was Dead Cold by Louise Penny. This is another book from my March Mystery Madness TBR, and it's the second book in the Chief Inspector Armand Gamache mystery series, which is set in Canada in a small town of Three Pines, I believe. I read the first book last year for the same readathon, and I really enjoyed it at the time. I thought that a small town had like this really quaint, like lovely feel to it, and I really enjoyed the book being set there. I liked the characters, and the mystery was quite good as well. However, here I don't know what happened, but this book is a disaster. No joke. The first 70 pages are spent on the characters in the town, like doing things, and in general just being horrible people. They're all, without exception, super judgmental of others, and like whenever it's sort of written from their perspective, they will go around like commenting on other people's appearances non-stop. And it's not just one person, it's not just one instance, it's literally all the time. I read 170 pages of this, and it happened all the time. Especially the amount of like fat shaming in this book is over the top ridiculous. I'm not even somebody who's particularly sensitive to that type of thing, but like, can you just shut up about other people's appearances for 1 second? Like, it's so annoying, so unnecessary. And at this point, I'm like questioning if this is really an attempt of the author to make all of these characters seem unlikable, or if she just really herself goes around thinking that way about people. I have no idea to tell like which it is, but either way, I was just so annoyed constantly. If you're gonna have like one character that's somewhat judgmental and like whatever, I'm fine with that, but every single one, it's just over the top and unnecessary. The titular figure of Armand Gamache does not enter the picture for 70 pages because, as I said, all that time is spent on making these characters seem unlikable, and the murder doesn't happen until page 100 or so, and I was just bored out of my freaking mind. I don't care. I don't care about the characters because they're all terrible people. I don't care about the mystery because it just happened, and also the person who died is a shit person. So again, I don't care about her, and the pacing is so slow and so just dull, and I just do not care. Can I also just say that Armand Gamache is not a particularly likable person? Like, he's made out to be a super like, I don't know, old school detective, like everybody's aspiring to be him, half in love with him, and has so much respect for his work and his thing. I'm like, I don't get why. Like, he's not that special. He's kind of just very full of himself and very like, I know so much better than all of you little people. And I am just annoyed at him. I am just not a fan of anything in this so far. I don't even like the town anymore because the people have been shown to be so shitty that, again, I just don't care anymore. I think this is gonna be the end of my time with the series. I'm sorry to say, I thought this was gonna be one of my new favorite series, but I just hated this book. so much. And you can let me know if you've read the sequels. I don't know how many there are at this point, but there's several. So let me know if you've read any of them, if it gets better, if this is just how the series is from now on. I don't know. Then I finally managed to make my way through volume 89 of Detective Conan by Gosho Aoyama. I ended up rating this book 3 stars. It is a very typical Conan manga. There's nothing sort of stand out about it. One thing I have realized in this particular one is that I think, well, with most books or graphic novels, you kind of assume, unless it's stated otherwise, that this is something that could occur in real life, right? It's just sort of like either a written or a painted, drawn, whatever, depiction of something that could happen in real life. However, with Conan, you just have to assume that this literally follows the rules of like pictures. This is all happening in pictures. And maybe that's confusing, but let me explain why. For example, there is a scene where somebody sees a culprit backlit. So he's in front of a window and there's light coming in through the window, so they only see like the silhouette, and they can't pick him out of a 3-person lineup. No joke. She can't pick him out because it was backlit. Now in the manga, obviously, he's drawn as like a completely black figure with no discerning features. But if it were real life, you would be able to tell something. Like if he was wearing a hat, if he had a bag, like the face, sort of his general features of his face and like his clothing or whatever, and maybe even a little bit of like actually see some face. I don't know, like backlighting isn't like, oh my god, now you can't see anything anymore. That's not how that works in real life. So that's just one of these things where I'm like, okay, I feel like you just have to suspend your disbelief to such a point where you literally just buy into that this is literally only happening in drawn format. Otherwise, like I think like 90% of this doesn't make sense. Second to last, I have one of the most surprising reads of this month, and that is My Not So Perfect Life by Sophie Kinsella. I honestly have owned this book for 2 years, I think, ever since it came out. I bought it on a whim, and then I read 80 pages and I hated it. I put it down as like, this is terrible, I hate everything about this. It's just like a chick lit, like literally if you've read any Sophie Kinsella book before, you've basically read this one. Like that's just how repetitive they usually are. And I enjoyed her work when I was younger because I wasn't as critical of a reader, but now I felt like now I can't do it anymore. Then, however, this month I was really in the mood to pick up a contemporary. I saw this on my shelf. I was like, might as well continue. So I literally started where I left off 2 years ago and read it in a day, and I gave it 4 stars. I'm not kidding. I really enjoyed this. Granted, this book does not have the most literary merit, but this book is just so fun. It was a quick read, it was lighthearted, it was fun. I actually laughed out loud at a few moments, even though it was cheesy, even though it was dumb and done before. I really just enjoyed it. Like I just had fun reading this. As always, it follows a girl working in marketing. Now, I don't know why marketing is such a like attractive field for like authors to have their characters work in. Like, I don't know what's with that. I feel like it just sounds really sexy, like marketing. Ooh. Anyway, so she lives in London and she works in marketing, and she hates her boss, Demeter, who she thinks is like perfect. Like she's really good at the marketing, like creative side of things, but she's a horrible boss. Like she kind of treats all her subordinates like shit, and she thinks that she's like the perfect life, and she hates her kind of for that as well, and just because she kind of treats her like shit. And one day she gets fired from her job and has to move back to her parents' farm, where they just are starting up a glamping business, and she works there. But then one day her boss Demeter comes to her parents' farm to stay at the glamping place, and she, because she has a terrible memory for faces, forgot about her. Like she can't remember, like she doesn't recognize her at all. And so the main character kind of basically tortures her for revenge a little bit, and then essentially over the course of events figures out that maybe her life isn't quite as perfect as she thought. Also, there's a romance involved. She meets this guy at work who then turns out to be like Demeter's lover, and it's just an issue, kind of like, oh my god, does he like me, does he not like me? But the romance in this isn't really that much on the forefront. It's really just about the main character figuring out that the perfect front we put up for people to the outside isn't always the truth. and doesn't always reflect what's actually going on. Now that sounds like a kind of basic message, but I think it's still done quite well in this, especially since it does have a very modern take on it. The main character has an Instagram feed where she like literally goes out of her way to like take cool and cute pictures of London that are like really goals, but essentially she doesn't have a lot of money, lives in a crappy flat, and kind of just tries to present this veneer on Instagram while that's not really what she actually is living. It does have a very modern take, and it's very of the time, and it just is some good commentary on our culture right now, while also being just fun and lighthearted. And finally, the last book I've read so far in March was a 4.5-star read that I really enjoyed. Again, surprisingly so. This is Force of Nature by Jane Harper. It's the second book in the Aaron Falk series, also a mystery series that is set in Australia, in the bushland. And it's just really cool because the main character is like a federal agent, but he's not actually in like a murder investigation division. He's in the financial sector, or like financial crimes area, but he always gets like drawn into murder cases. And I don't know, that just is like really unique to me. So in this book, the case surrounds a group of, I think, 10 people that went on a corporate retreat to the Australian bushland to go on a hike for a weekend, and they kind of return, but one of the women goes missing on the hike, and the book is told in like two perspectives, not two perspectives, it's told in like multiple, but in two timelines, I guess. So first we follow the present, where the investigators are investigating, and Aaron Falk gets drawn into this because his division has been investigating that company, and so they're trying to find this missing woman and trying to figure out what actually happened on that hike. And then we also follow the people on the hike, so several days in the past, kind of in chronological order, exactly what happened between them, the tensions that arose, kind of the things that had been like building up and kind of came to the forefront as they were like stranded in the wilderness without really much to eat and drink and like a good place to sleep. So running into all kinds of trouble there, and sort of it had this kind of Lord of the Flies aspect to it a little bit, because they were literally basically fighting for their survival at some point, and that obviously brings out kind of the worst in people a lot of the times. And I thought that was really interesting, and just in general the like relationships between the characters and the tension that arose between them was so interesting. And I just, oh my god, that alone kept the book going for me. I love the way that it was told in these like alternating timelines, because that just created so much tension, and usually each chapter would end on a little bit of a cliffhanger, so I was like, oh my god, I need to keep reading. I also read this book fairly quickly because due to this type of writing style, I just could not put it down. It was so gripping and exciting, and I will say the only reason I deducted half a star is because of the ending. It wasn't like fully as exciting as I had hoped, otherwise it could have definitely been a 5-star. But overall, I just love this. It was honestly one of the best written mystery novels I have ever read, and I highly recommend it. The good thing to me doing this mid-month wrap-up is that you can still pick up this book for March Mystery Madness if you wish to do so. So yeah, there's that for you. Hope you go take that tip away and actually go read this book, because it's so freaking amazing, and I highly recommend it. I was talking so fast for that last book because I've slowly been realizing that even though I said at the beginning, yeah, I'm doing this mid-month wrap-up so the end wrap-up doesn't get too long, this video is already like 40 minutes long. At least that's how long I've been filming for, so I apologize. Anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Let me know if you've read any of these books I mentioned in the comments down below and what you thought of them. And also let me know how your reading month is going so far. I'm just so pleased with how much I've been reading, and honestly how much I've been enjoying of what I've been reading. I hope you enjoyed this video. Please give it a like and subscribe if you did, and don't forget to come back very soon for another one. I upload every Tuesday, Friday and Sunday, and I will see you then. Have a lovely week. Bye!